we got Alejandro on the call. He'll be running you guys through a POC and setting that up. Um, so in order, before we get started, usual things that we go through here. So as usual, um, let's take a look at what's kind of been happening around the space. So first things first, if you haven't followed us on socials, follow us on our socials, our Twitter, Discord as you are here, Telegram, and then also our email list. You can find our email list and sub there at the bottom of our homepage at immunified.com. In terms of new bug bounties, you could take a look at it in the new bug bounties section. The one that we have most recent is Beanstalk, and this was launched a few days ago. They have a $1.1 million bounty available, so you could take a look at that. I'll post that in the new, can't spell right now. So new bug bounties is there. In terms of bug bounty updates, you could take a look at that as well. There's a few things that have been going on the past few days in terms of different bug bounties that are being updated. As usual, we put that channel together for you guys, so you guys didn't have to guess in terms of what has been updated in terms of assets in scope or impacts in scope and what has been added or taken away. So again, I'll add that to the chat here. And then other things to run through in terms of, I want to reiterate this from last week as well. This is the badge icon that was just recently rolled out, so you can read a little bit more about it here. So essentially, just for those of you that missed it last week, the badge is essentially something that we're placing next to a project's name to know that you're essentially dealing with reliable projects that are active and up to date. Please keep in mind this is just in its early stages, and so there is some refining that needs to be done. But these are projects that are active and up to date with the latest rules and procedures from Immunify. So you can read that quick Zendesk article to get some more information. And yeah, I know there's been a few things that's been happening in the space lately. So quickly, one of the bigger ones that has happened is something called for a trading platform called Mango Markets. So I'll throw that in here. So essentially what happened there in summary is so Mango Markets is a decentralized perpetuals and spot trading platform. I believe it's on Solana. I guess correct me if I'm mistaken. But they essentially had a $100 million exploit after the Oracle or the protocol's Oracle was attacked. So essentially what happened was the hacker was able to drive up the price of their deposited collateral and essentially allow themselves to borrow large amounts of tokens from the protocol's treasury. So that's kind of that in a nutshell in terms of what happened there. That's one fairly large exploit that happened in the past few days. The other one that is small compared to that, this one was $2 million. This was something that happened for Temple DAO. And so with what ended up happening there was a hack that was essentially caused by missing an only migrator check. So it seems as if BlockSec and PeC Shield confirmed that the root cause was really insufficient access to control the migrate stake function. So two things to kind of take a look into. That's kind of been happening with around the space. And I want to be quick with it because I want to make sure we had enough time to run through what Alejandro is bringing to the bringing for you guys. And as you guys know, we will be running through this specific article in terms of building a POC. This is regards to the Uranium Heist. So without further ado, Alejandro, please give yourself a quick intro and I'll hand it off to you for you to lead.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Chris. Hey guys, I'm Alejandro Munoz McDonald. I'm a smart contract triager and engineer at Immunify. and I'll be walking you through Uranium's POC. Chris, I think you might actually have some more time to kill because apparently I need to install an extension to share my screen in Discord. So I may have to restart and rejoin really quick.
Okay, yeah, no worries, no worries. So yeah, go ahead and take care of what you need to take care of it. Let me know when you're ready. But yeah, so while Alejandro is doing that, you guys will be monitoring the event channel for any questions or comments, or even before we begin, if you guys have any questions, if you guys are new and new to the Hacker Hangouts, welcome to your first Hacker Hangout. Thank you guys for hopping on here. If you guys have any questions or anything that you guys want to get answered prior to Alejandro, starting his presentation or his walkthrough, send us a note. Like I said, myself as well as Pepin will be monitoring the chat. So if you have anything, feel free to run through it. If you have feedback for us, or if you want something else, that you guys want us to run through, or at least show you guys in any later Hacker Hangouts, throw them in the channel. We'll read them. I take all the feedback. I see what I can do. I see what the lowest hanging fruits are in order to get you guys the content that you guys want. Again, like, these Hacker Hangouts are for you guys, not really. It's for what you guys want to see, what you guys want to talk about, what you guys want to learn. So anything that you want to see in the future, throw it up in the chat. I'll take note of it and see if we can get these things up and running. Yes, Alejandro also did that one as well, Mohammed. Elliot, what does the new verified status require from the projects? So essentially, they just have two specific criteria right now. Again, this is still in the early stage, so maybe it might change later down the line. But number one, it's essentially using the updated Immunify severity classification system. And number two, essentially accepting the new Immunify bug bounty program operations and agreeing to adhere to those two specific criteria. So that's kind of just two of those things right now. Let's take a look here. Awesome. So let's see what else we got. The recent Binance hack that was also discussed. That was also, yeah, that's what I thought. I haven't been able to oh yeah, that's a good one about Mango as well. The other one that I was gonna bring out, which is actually kind of messed up, was the doxing of users from Celsius. I'm personally not a user of Celsius. I do have a few friends in, I guess, institutional investment places that were not happy with getting information released there, so that wasn't cool. But but yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, in terms of Binance, I forgot to actually run through that, so I forgot to add that to my list. So thanks for bringing some light to the Binance exploit. So yeah, so as we're waiting for Alejandro to do a quick restart, if there's anything else, like I said, that you guys want to see the whole POC. Yeah, so anything that you guys want to see, either because I know we have another POC article that was released recently. I believe that one is, I forgot what it was called. Let me take a look. 100 Finance. So if you guys want to see that one as well, let me know. Otherwise, if there's other things that you guys want to see in terms of these Hacker Hangouts that you guys want to learn, or you guys want to learn, I mean, or have us on the call, let us know. I'll give you a quick look into what I have on my queue. So obviously, projects being the low-hanging fruit. Sometimes I'll have a project on here and there. I'm still trying to work on getting another auditing company to hop on here. I know last time we had Chain Security. Maybe they might be up for round 2. I know everybody's been asking for Sam CZ round 2. He's been a little bit busy, so he hasn't given me a definitive answer in terms of whether or not he's gonna hop on here or not. But I'm still trying. Okay, cool. Yeah, Mohammed. Yeah, DeFi hunt, like a DeFi bug hunt, that would be interesting. Um, so yeah, so that would be okay. So a bug hunt. Yeah, the only issue that I have that with that, Mohammed, or the only one issue that's there is because like it's not as if we can knock that out in an hour. Like, as you can see, this is that Carl Farderson one was actually fairly extensive and fairly long. Um, so yeah, so let me see. Okay. And then let's see what else we have. Da Vinci. Is bytecode analysis useful with finding vulnerabilities similar to assembly and reverse engineering? Or is that level of analysis not necessary? I will go ahead and ask Alejandro when he's back. That's out of my scope right there. Sentient, you're welcome. It's funny because I call you Sentient, but I still know you as Nuko Nam, which is hilarious. Yes, it started. Yes, it started. Is this the first time we've had a live POC here? I believe so. I haven't when since I've been running these hacker hangouts, I haven't had a live POC. So yes. Since we've started earlier this year, this is the first time we've had a live POC here. I guess we'll give it a little bit to get Alejandro on. I know he's doing a restart so he can change his permissions, which is all good. So again, like any other questions or feedback, you guys kind of heard what was on my queue. I do have, um, yeah, I do. The one thing, or actually, let me throw this out to you guys because I'm interested because I've been actually working on this for next week. And so we'll give it a trial run for next week. So next week, essentially, I know in the past I've had projects on to just come introduce themselves, talk about their bounties, but it hasn't really like some of it has gone okay, some of it has just been like a little bit not so okay, or at least like not towards the type of interaction that we'd like. So the one thing that I'd like to do with some of these projects, and I'm looking to do that next week, which might be interesting for you guys to hop on and give me some feedback there, is for the projects to hop on and essentially get a snippet of code that's essentially been um, either recently audited or recently something, or and essentially have them run a spot the bug challenge with you guys. Essentially, that allows them to really interact with you guys and have you guys start taking a look in terms of some of their assets and smart contracts. So that's kind of something that I've been working on. I know, or Pepin and I have been working on in terms of getting that live for you guys. I think that'll be fun. So we'll see how that goes next week. So yeah, so in terms of events, next week, the project that's going to be running that with us will be Beanstalk Protocol. And I believe they just released theirs was a $1 million bug bounty that they just released. Let me just double. Oh yeah, I just spoke about that. Ha, $1.1 million bounty. So they'll be hopping on with us next week, hopefully giving you guys a little bit of insight in terms of what's happening there. UT card. Okay, cool. Yeah. Another bug hunt video. Um, yeah, I mean, it's probably better if it was, for example, like live and for you to be able to essentially, um, what do you call it? Ask questions while it's going on. I think that's probably a better kind of process there. I guess we got to figure out how we're essentially going to do this as well. But awesome. So we got Alejandro back on stage. So welcome back, my friend. And
Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
if you want, I will let you take it away. And yeah, I'll be monitoring the chat and hopefully, yeah, and get some of these questions pushed over to you if there's
Yeah.
anything else. But yeah, I'll let you lead the way, Alejandro.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sticking by through the technical difficulties, guys. Um, cool. All right. So I guess I'll take it from here, Chris. Um, awesome. Okay, so
You know you're waiting response. Yeah, yeah, go for it.
yeah. Um, so today I'll be going over building a POC for the Uranium Heist. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Hefirius for writing this article, which I based my Forge POC on. So this one used hard hat if you're following the article directly. There's a few slight differences, but we'll go over those in creating the POC. So for those of you who haven't read the article, so overview is on April 28th, 2021, Uranium Finance, which is an automated market maker deployed on BNB chain, Binance, was hacked. So the heist resulted in a loss of over $50 million. And really quick, so what is an automated market maker, an AMM? An AMM is an automated market maker which provides liquidity to an exchange it operates in through automated trading. So this is some algorithm which automatically fulfills trades. And Uniswap is a great example of a battle-tested AMM you can interact with right now. And in fact, Uranium is a direct fork of Uniswap with some minor changes and deployed to Binance chain. And as we'll see, one of those small changes led to the loss of $50 million. But we'll get into that. So an overview of how the automated market makers work. So Uniswap uses an algorithm in its AMM called constant product algorithm. And that's just an equation K equals X times Y. So Uniswap has these pair contracts which consist of two tokens. And the pair contract keeps track of the balances of the tokens. And using the algorithm K equals X times Y, where X is one token balance and Y is the other token balance, the product of the two must always equal some magic constant value K. So this X times Y equals K gives us, so this K price curve would look something like this here. So when we go to trade, say we want to trade some of asset A or asset one for asset B, asset two. How does the AMM determine how much of token B to give for our token A? How does it automatically price this? So assuming we start here in the original price, which is currently determined by the pairs of the balances of each token that are in the contract. If we put in some amount of asset A, delta X in, it pushes us over to the right. And since the AMM wants to keep the price on our X times Y equals K curve, so it always wants to keep the price on this curve here. Since it wants to keep the price on that curve, it's going to give us delta Y amount of asset 2 or asset B. So our new price ends up here. You can see as we start to put more and more of asset A in, the curve starts to get shallower. So that means there's less of token B, there's less of a height difference that it will give for each token A that I put in. So this kind of arbitrage opportunity keeps the amount of tokens of each pair relatively stable, since the further along the curve the price is pushed, the greater the arbitrage opportunity in the opposite direction becomes. So I kind of went on a tangent there, but it's an important concept to understand. So in an efficient market with no fees, X times Y should always equal K. However, in reality, Uniswap and every other AMM will likely be taking fees. So this throws off our X times Y equals K formula slightly. But let's see how Uniswap accounts for this. So if we scroll down in this POC article, we can see this adjustments algorithm. So we have our fee here, which is 0.3%. We're taking our balance of X before, or balance of X before, our balance of Y before, multiplying that together. So that's our previous K, so X times Y equals K. And then we're taking our balance of X after the fee times balance of Y after the fee, and that's our K after. And they're always just ensuring that new K is larger than or equal to the old K, which is fine. That ensures that our liquidity providers in the pool are earning trading fees. So if we look at what that looks like in Solidity code, we can see here that our balance adjusted is our original balance of our asset A times 1,000, and we're subtracting the amount we put in multiplied by 3. So the reason there's these weird numbers here is because Uniswap takes that 0.3% fee. So this is the 0.3, and it has a basis of 1,000. So essentially, so what we could be doing here is multiplying by 3 and then dividing by 1,000 here. So we get 0.3% of the amount we put in. But instead, what's happening because of precision is we're just multiplying both sides of the equation by 1,000. So, this 1,000, instead of being division over here, is multiplied to our balance. And then right here, the other side of the equation is also getting 1,000 as well. So here we're getting the balance adjusted of asset 1, asset A. Here we're getting the balance adjusted of asset 2. So balance adjusted times 0 times balance adjusted of 1 is our new K. And then here we're calculating our old K, and we're multiplying that value by 1,000 squared because we're doing this precision adjustment here as well. So we need to make sure that we multiply our old K by 1,000 as well, twice. Okay, does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. That's why there's these fancy numbers here. If you guys have any questions, I'll occasionally look at the chat and try to answer them. But anyway, so now that we kind of understand how Uniswap is accounting for fees, let's take a look at some of the changes that Uranium made to this code. So if we take a look down here, we see it's pretty similar. So the only thing we see changed here is this fee. It's now 16 instead of 3. And you'd be like, oh, they're taking 1.6%. Well, they actually changed the basis as well. So now the basis is 10,000 here. So this would be 0.16%. So they wanted to get some more fidelity in the percentage fee they were taking. So they added another 0 to this basis. However, if we look at our old K calculation, we can see that it's still 1,000. So Uranium adjusted the basis for the new balances, the new K, but they forgot to add a 0 for the old K. Right, so what does that do? Well, our old K is only being multiplied by 1,000 squared, but our new K is being multiplied by 10,000 squared. 10,000 here, 10,000 here. They get multiplied together. It's 10,000 squared. That essentially means our old K is always going to be less than our new K. So this is pretty much always going to be true. Our new K, since we have a factor of 1,000 or however much more than our old K calculation here. So this require statement isn't actually checking the correct thing. So now that we have an idea of what the flaw is here, we can get into writing a PoC. So when we go to submit this to the project, they can plainly see the flaw is exploitable and bad. And we can also double check our work. So yeah, as I mentioned, the article this is based off is using Hardhat to set up their test environment. But I wanted to do something a little different and show you guys how to set one up with Forge, which Forge is really cool. So if you don't know about it, you should check it out. And the first thing we're going to do is open up your development environment. So I use Visual Studio Code. But if you like to use Vim or Atom or Notepad, to each their own, you just need access to a console as well. So the first things we're going to need to set up is Forge. We're going to need to install Forge. It's really easy on Linux and Mac OS. Sorry, Windows users, you're going to have to build Forge from source, or you can use Docker. But yeah, if you're on Mac or Linux, you can just use this curl request, and you should get access to Foundry. The other prerequisite for this is in RPC node, because we're going to be forking BSC mainnet. So I followed the same RPC provider that was used in the tutorial, which is QuickNode. I set up a free account. You can set up one endpoint with a free account, which is all we need. And then you're going to have to copy this HTTP provider URL. Yeah, so once you guys have that stuff set up, we'll get right into Visual Studio Code, which is right here. Okay, so I'm starting with a completely empty directory. And I'm going to show you guys from empty directory all the way up down to PoC, complete PoC. So the first thing we do after Forge is installed is we can do Forge init. And what that does is just set up all the environment files that we're going to need to run our Forge tests. So we can see there's a Foundry toml. There's some properties in here that we can adjust. There's this test folder. There's this source folder. Our libraries for external things like OpenZeppelin, Uniswap. And we also have this scripts that we can create. So what we're going to be concerned with, though, is our source and test files. So after Forge init, though, actually, we're going to need to install some dependencies first. So like I mentioned, this lib stores stuff like your OpenZeppelin dependencies, and that's exactly what we're going to install. Because for this attack, we're going to target wrapped BNB and BUSD. So those are both ERC20 tokens. And to interact with those tokens, we need some kind of interface for the ERC20 tokens. And OpenZeppelin provides that for us. So what we can do is Forge install, and then we're going to point to OpenZeppelin. So this is the organization, the GitHub organization OpenZeppelin, and then the repository. So any project hosted on GitHub, you can easily install it into your Forge dependencies by just putting the organization and then the repository. We're also going to want to have some Uniswap interfaces to interact with Uranium's contracts. So because they're essentially just a fork of Uniswap, we can use a lot of the same interfaces that Uniswap has. So the things we're going to want to install is Forge install Uniswap. We need V2 core contracts, and then we also need V2 periphery contracts. Cool. So you can see if you open up your lib, you should have those repositories in there. You can open it up and you can see OpenZeppelin's contracts are here. And the next thing we're going to do is really quickly set up some remappings. So it's a lot easier to import them into our Solidity files. So Forge lets you create a file called remappings.txt. And then A really common thing is to have like at open Zeppelin, like import at open Zeppelin slash contracts slash whatever. So we can do at open Zeppelin, and we'll say that refers to our lib. Let's check, make sure lib slash open Zeppelin dash contracts. Anytime we do at open Zeppelin, it should refer to this directory. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for Uniswap. Uniswap equals lib v2 core. And actually, we're going to do Uniswap slash v2 core. So we have two Uniswap libraries here. Differentiate them. Uniswap slash v2 periphery. You can also do this in the console. There's like forge remap. But this is a little easier for me. Okay, so now that we have all our interfaces set up, we can start thinking about our attack. So what will our attack method be? Well, the simplest way is just to call the swap function and get a large amount of the other pair token for a small amount of our token. So like I said, the POC in the article uses wrapped BNB and BUSD pair. So I'll just be using that. So attack looks like step one is send some BNB to our attack contract. Step two is wrap that BNB so we can trade it in the pair. Step three is send some of that wrapped BNB to the pair contract. Step four is to trigger a swap to drain the BUSD side of the pair. And then we're going to send some of that BUSD we stole back to the pair contract and trigger another swap to steal the wrapped BNB side. So we can execute this attack on both sides of the trade and drain both tokens from the pair. So first, we're going to set up a contract that can wrap BNB. Let's go here and just rename this counter contract. And we'll go uranium attack contract, something like that. We'll rename this too. And we'll get rid of all this. So we're going to need some of our imports. Like I said, we're interacting with ERC20 tokens. So we're going to import the ERC20 interface from OpenZeppelin. OpenZeppelin slash contracts slash token and IERC20.sol. We're also going to make our attack contract ownable because we want to be able to put some of these functions behind access control, so not anyone can call our functions. So we'll go and take that from OpenZeppelin's library as well. And then we also need our Uniswap interface contracts to interact with those. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste those from my notes. There's just three of them, but yeah, I don't need to type all this out and bore you guys with that. But the important thing is we are taking the Uniswap v2 pair, so we can interact with the pair contract, Uniswap v2 factory, which is kind of a router for our pairs, and then the Uniswap v2 router. And then finally, Forge gives us access to some cool contracts in Forge STD, one of which is console.sol. So it's similar to Hardhat's console log. This just lets us make print statements for our tests. Okay, so our attack contract is going to extend ownable. And when we extend ownable, we need a constructor. And the message sender, the deployer of this contract is going to be set as the owner in the ownable constructor. We're going to want to implement a receive function, which lets us receive the native asset, BNB here. And we'll add a fallback function as well. And then finally, we're going to set up some constants. So you guys can get these constants from the PoC in the article, but this is just the address for the ERC20 token of wrapped BNB, the ERC20 token BUSD, and the uranium factory, which lets us find those paired contracts which are exploitable. Okay, so what we're doing here, we were making an attack contract which could wrap the native asset BNB to WBNB so we can use it to attack this pair contract. So let's go ahead and write a wrap function. And we actually need a interface for the WBNB contract. So I forgot to add this in here. I rep native, and it just has this deposit function. Okay, so with that interface, we're going to take that interface, IWrap native, and cast the WBNB address to a IWrap native contract. And that way we can call deposit on it. And deposit, we're going to send a message value. Oh, sorry. A value of this contract's balance. So we're sending all the BNB that this contract owns to the WBNB contract, and that will wrap it for us. And then we can go ahead and add some console logs, make sure we actually have this B and WBNB. WBNB, start with So we'll start with this much balance of WBNB. So we're using the ERC20 interface to get access to this balance of function call. And we're passing in this contract's address. Okay, so this is just an internal function. So let's make an external one we can call. That calls wrap. All right, so this is our simple contract to wrap BNB. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is working by updating our test. So let's go ahead and rename this test really quickly, Uranium PoC. We'll change the name of this test contract as well. We still want to extend this test because it's a forge test. We're no longer importing this counter, we're importing our attack contract. So we're going to define this as uranium attack contract. And here in our forged test, we have access to some setup for our tests. So this will automatically run before our tests. It's just something that Forge tests do. And then it will run all of our functions that are prefixed with tests. So anything named test something, that's a test, that's an individual test that Forge will run. So we'll just do test PoC. You don't need to take any parameters, and I'll delete this test code for now. So we are not making a counter. We are now deploying a uranium contract, uranium attack contract. Cool. So one last thing is we need to give some BNB, some native asset to our attack contract to be able to execute this attack. So we could like just set up our chain so that we have our contract account has some BNB in it already. But since we're forking, there are a couple of options. The first one is to impersonate a BNB whale and then use their funds to transfer to our test account. Or Forge has this really cool cheat codes. And all I have to do is call vm.deal and pass the address of the attack contract. This is who we're dealing BNB funds to and the amount of funds to deal. So we'll just send 1 ether. This is just an alias for 1 to the 1 times 10 to the 18th. This is just something in Solidity that you get. So instead of typing out all those zeros, we can just do 1 ether. But this is really the native asset of the BNB chain, which is BNB. So VM is something that's given to us by Forge. So in any test, we can just call VM dot, and we have access to tons of different functions from Forge, many of which are cheat codes. So there's things like VM dot. I can't remember exactly how to impersonate someone, but we can impersonate an account. We can do all kinds of cool things, and I highly encourage you to check out what things you can do in the Forge docs. We can also like deal. We can also do this with ERC20 tokens. So if you pass the ERC20 token address first, and then the receiver, and then the amount, you can give someone, a certain amount of some random ERC20 token. I think actually it should work with wrapped BNB. But we're going to do this way. So now that we've dealt BNB to our attack contract so that we can execute this attack, we're going to call the attack contract start attack and just make sure that we are correctly wrapping this BNB. So to run our test, all we have to do is forge test. And then you can see all these other modifiers. So this -VV, that's just the verbosity of our test. So if we want to be able to see our console logs, we want to have at least 2 Vs here. The more Vs you add, the more information you get, essentially, and you can kind of see the call trace. So -VV, we want to see our console logs. And then we're going to pass the fork URL. So hopefully you guys have set up a RPC URL already with QuickNode. So you're going to want to copy that HTTP URL and export it in your environment variable. I just have it named RPC URL. And then finally, we have a fork block number, which allows us to start the state of our forked chain from a block in the past. And this lets us do things like if a contract was already hacked, we can go back in time and replicate it on our local fork before the attack happened, or before like a patch was made to certain contracts. Just very useful in general. So I might not have RPC URL. Okay, so I didn't have RPC URL defined. So let's export that. Clear this. And then we'll run our forge test again. Cool, we have a problem with our remappings. That should be an easy fix. V2 periphery. Ah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So this is V2 core. This should be pointing to V2 periphery. Thank you. Open Zeppelin. Do I need the slash here? Possibly. Oh, missing an E in Open Zeppelin. It's what happens when you do a live POC. This is actually a lot of what a POC is, that they don't show you. It's a lot of console errors and build errors, and just figuring out what the heck is going on. I'm going to cheat a little and take from my other POC and just copy these remappings over. I'll show it on the screen for a second here. I think, what was I missing here? I think I was missing this slash at the end here. Oh, and the other Open Zeppelin was misspelled as well. So yeah, so sorry about that, guys. This is the new remappings. We got at Open Zeppelin equals lib slash Open Zeppelin dash contracts, and the same thing with the Uniswap. Okay, let's try that again. Unresolved mapping. Not sure what I am doing wrong here. Open Zeppelin slash contracts. Open Zeppelin slash contracts. Ah, so we missed a folder here. We look at our Open Zeppelin contracts token. It's actually inside this ERC20 folder. Just make sure our ownable is in this root access folder. Yes, it is. Okay. Okay, awesome. All right. We got all of our typos resolved. Now we can continue with our POC. So we can see here our test passed because nothing reverted. But in our logs, we can see our console log of how much BNB, wrapped BNB that we're starting with. So this deposit function gave us our wrapped BNB in return for all the BNB that we had in our contract. So this looks right. So we successfully wrapped our BNB. The next function we're going to write is our take funds function, which is where the actual swap with the uranium pair is going to happen. So let's write a function take funds. It's going to take the address of our token A, token 0, the address of our token B, token 1, and the unit amount that we're trading. We'll make this internal. So what do we need? Well, we need to interact with the Uranium Factory to find the pair contract for these two specific tokens. So we'll go I Uniswap v2 factory. All right, the next thing we're going to do is get that Uniswap pair contract. Pair. Pair. And to get that pair, we're going to make a call on our factory, get pair, and pass it the address of token 0 and token 1. Cool. So we're calling the factory, getting the pair for token 0 and 1, and we're casting that to Uniswap v2 pair object. And then we're going to send our token 0 that we want to swap to token 1 to the pair contract. So we need our ERC20 token 0. I'm going to transfer, transfer to the pair contract this amount of tokens. Cool. So the next thing we're going to do is calculate how much amount out we should be getting. So unit amount out, ERC20, our second token. We're getting the balance of token 1 of the pair contract and multiplying that by 99 divided by 100. So we're essentially expecting almost the entire balance of the second token to be sent out. And then we can call pair.swap. So this is where the actual bug is being exploited. So swap takes our amount out of the first token. So token 0. Okay, so this ternary operation here is just saying if the token 0 as defined for the pair is our target token, then the amount out should be the first parameter. But if the token that we're trying to convert to is not the first token 0 in the pair contract, then amount out should be the second parameter. And then we're going to have the receiver address this, and then some data, some bytes, but we don't care about this, so we're going to just call new bytes 0, pass 0. This is not relevant to the attack. So yeah, so that's the swap. This take funds should execute a swap and ask for basically the entire balance of the target token back. So this should be using a very small amount of our token 0 to get all of the token 1. Now that we have to take funds, let's put this into our attack. So we've wrapped the BNB. Now we need to use the BNB. So we're going to call our take funds. We're going to use the BNB. We're asking for BUSD, and we're sending our balance of BNB, our entire amount of BNB to this contract. So this amount, again, is being used on this line. So we're calling BNB.transfer, transferring that amount to the pair contract. So this should drain the BUSD side of the pair, and then we're going to call take funds and just reverse those parameters, BUSD to WBNB. We'll do one Ether here as well. And then let's console log some values to make sure that we've actually stolen these tokens. So we do BUSD stolen. It's really helpful to add console logs in your POCs for the projects to more easily understand what's going on in your POC. It definitely helps with resolving bug submissions a lot faster, and make sure to make them clean, because the harder it is to understand your POC, the longer it's going to take for you to get paid out. There may be more misunderstandings. It's just always good to make your POCs as clear as possible. I know it's difficult when you're rushing to be the first to submit, but it makes it so much easier to get paid when you put the time into explaining. Cool. So we have both of our calls to our function here, which does the swap and exploits this vulnerability. So let's finish off this console log. We're getting our BUSD balance and printing that out. And we're getting our WBNB balance and printing that out, just to be sure that our hack worked. And you know what? I'm going to also print the BUSD value before the hack, just to show that there should be no BUSD in this contract. Okay, so this is looking good. We're wrapping our BNB. We're stealing a bunch of BUSD by using a small amount of BNB. And then we're using that stolen BUSD to then drain the other side of the pair of BNB. So, moment of truth. Let's run this with forge test -VV. Make sure you're forking so that these addresses here actually have a contract that they're referencing. And then make sure you're also forking from this block number just to make sure all the values are the same. So if we run this, we can see everything was okay, nothing reverted. We started with 0 BUSD. We started with 1 times 10 to the 18th of BNB, WBNB. And we can see that we've stolen, I don't even know how to say this number, 85 something. Way more than what we started with. Same thing with our wrapped BNB, about 1,000 times an order of magnitude larger than what we started with here. So we've written our POC. Works. Our next step would be to go to Immunify, find the project's bug bounty program, and create a report and include our POC in the report So it makes it a lot easier for the project to see they've been hacked, or they could have been hacked. Sorry, not that they've been hacked. Please do not test this stuff on mainnet. Only ever test it on local forks. You will get banned if you test on mainnet. And you won't get paid. So, yeah, if we take a step back and look at this code for our attack contract, it's really not that hard. You know, this wrapping isn't necessary if we already have some WBNB. So really our attack code, this is pretty much all of our attack code. We're transferring our token 0 to the pair contract and performing a swap. A lot of POCs end up being relatively simple, even if the underlying vulnerability is quite complex. So especially if a bug bounty program requires a POC, definitely submit one, and start working on those skills now, so that when you find that bug, you can whip up a POC in 30 minutes to an hour and have a beautiful report submitted to projects. I guess I'll open up the floor to some questions. But is Chris still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hey, man.
I guess to see what the questions that are coming in. I think the first question that comes up is, so Corey wrote, what would you submit, the whole folder or just the code on the screen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's usually easiest when you link to a private gist. When you have a lot of external environment changes, especially if you have like a bunch of test files, a lot of different contract files to be able to interface with the vulnerable contracts, it's best to use some kind of file sharing, so that a project can just take your POC and hit run, and that's all they need to see, that your vulnerability is real. So Gist is really good at that. If your POC is pretty simple, like this one was, you can just copy and paste your attack contract. We have some code formatting, like with the tilde and the reports, and that should be pretty straightforward. But yeah, some of the more complex POCs, Gist works great. Private Gist.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, feel free to throw your questions in the chat, and then we'll get to them. I know there was a few of them where you guys were helping each other out in the chat, which is awesome. So thank you guys for doing that while Alejandro was running through this this tutorial. I guess one of the other questions that I saw from Da Vinci earlier was, when you're talking about explaining the POC in general and making it as simple as possible, do you mean the comments in the code or the report submission? I would suspect it's both, but I'd like your confirmation there.
Yeah, so it's great to have a simple POC, so that you can support, even if your explanation for the vulnerability gets pretty complex, as it can many times. If you keep your POC pretty straightforward, it just helps so much in showing real direct impact, because all this data is public. If you fork exactly what's going on mainnet and call some functions and the contract gets drained of funds, it's very clear that there's an issue somewhere. So your reports don't necessarily need to be very simple. Bugs can get very complex. But the POC, you want to be clean and simple, because the more print statements you have, the harder it is to determine what's going on. And what you really want to display is, what the starting state is and what after a hack is the end state. So here, we showed how much BUSD and WBNB this contract started with, and then we showed how much it ended with. And that's very clear to a project, that funds have been drained. Looks like we have a question from Sentient. Say you
Yep.
find what
Go
you
ahead.
think.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem. Say you find what you think is a bug, wrote a POC, but not confident about the quality of your POC. Would you advise to submit? So if you're it depends on what you mean by quality. So if your POC does exploit the vulnerability you explained, that should be good enough. When I say, keep it simple, keep it clean, that's to make it as easy as possible for a project to understand the bug that you're pointing out. Because in the end, that's what you're trying to do. We're trying to help this project identify the fix in their code. And the faster and easier you make it for them, the more likely, the faster you'll get paid. So, if you have a POC that works, that's already miles ahead of most people submitting bugs on our platform. Um, you know, if you have to go back and change a bunch of things to, make the POC a little cleaner, sometimes it's not always worth it. But when you start with making the POC with that in mind, um, that really helps.
Also, Penguin was asking or was adding on to the question: if you were sure you found a crypt, but you have a lack of confidence in your reporting skills, would Immunify be able to jump on a call with you to ensure it's coherent before submitting?
No. Big no. Yeah, that's not something we do. What usually ends up happening is, if there's a problem with the project understanding a vulnerability, the submission will go to mediation, and then that's when we step in. So we can help out explain vulnerabilities that you've found in a project, but it has to go through our mediation process. Since the project is receiving the report for it first, and then if there's any issues, we'll step in and be the third party to review the bug report and see if what side is right in their technical explanation of things. So yeah, if you sure you found a crit, write what you can in a report to explain it. If the project's bug bounty program requires a POC, include a POC, and then submit the bug. And if it's a real bug, if it's a real critical bug, and the project doesn't want to acknowledge that, that's when we'll step in and help out.
I also saw another question kind of in regards to submissions. So Smith 3DX was asking if a private GitHub repo would be sufficient for submitting a report.
Yeah. So private GitHub repos are a little more tricky just because there's, a back and forth process you have to do to add GitHub users to the repository. So something that's like private but still accessible is ideal. I don't believe we have the option to attach files through the submission page, but adding the attack contract and the test in the code blocks is fine, and anything similar to gist is okay too.
So another question is Oh, actually, Corey, is there an obligation on the bug submitter to offer a fix? Usually because I do a lot of the launches as well, usually that's specified within the bug bounty program on a project's bug bounty page. Usually they require not just a POC, but also a suggestion for a fix as well. But also probably best to check with the projects as well as you go through these submissions. And then also keep stacking. Is POC code always a requirement? Not always, but again, check the bug bounty page. We have the little tags there that let you know if a POC is required. Most of the time, it's usually required for critical and high vulnerabilities. But again, sometimes a project would require them from everything from a critical to a low. So just double check the bug bounty pages before proceeding there. And then I guess like an additional question there is for those, I guess, init bugs, can you say that you've not initialized and anyone who does can take over the proxy? Or not, Alejandro, do you have any insight there?
Wait, what was the question?
From keep stacking, that second part for those about, I don't know if he means initialized bugs.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right, for the like uninitialized proxies. Yeah, so those are pretty straightforward. If the bug bounty program says it requires POC for critical and high, just submit a POC. It's really easy, especially for those uninitialized proxy bugs, to write a POC. So you might as well, especially since their BBP says it's required. Also, writing these POCs not only helps a project understand the vulnerability, but it helps you double check your own work as well. So, there have been cases where uninitialized proxies don't necessarily lead to a critical vulnerability. For example, uninitialized proxies usually only lead to critical vulnerabilities with UUPS proxies. UUPS proxies, the upgrade logic is in the implementation. So if you were to initialize the implementation, become an owner, and then be able to use a delegate call to say self-destruct the implementation, since it was supposed to have the upgrade logic in it, the proxy now points to nothing and doesn't have a way to upgrade the implementation. Yeah, exactly like the wormhole hack. Or the wormhole 10 mil payout, yeah. So it really helps you, and also there's some like edge cases like Gnosis Safe, the master contract sets a value in the constructor, I think, that prevents people from calling initialize on it. And you would pretty quickly figure that out from trying to write a POC for initializing it. There's also another really easy way to check if something's initializable is using Tenderly. So Tenderly lets you like simulate transactions through their web browser app. And if you have the contract ABI, you can just put the contract address into Tenderly, go to the contract, and then hit simulate. And then in there, you can select the initializer and run. And if that initializer goes through, you can see that, hey, yeah, I can initialize this contract. But you have to make sure that, that leads to something that is actually a critical and impact. An uninitialized proxy isn't necessarily an impact. It's just a way to create one of these critical impacts.
Cool. So just an FYI, we'll keep this open for another 5 minutes. So I'll take a last call for questions. So just throw them up in the chat. If we don't get them answered on the call, we can get have Alejandro answer them in the chat as we move forward. So another one that Sentient has asked is a follow-up question, which is he's learned that some projects are not triaged by Immunify during submission and rely on mediation if a POC doesn't land. But as a white hat, you only learn this at escalation. The question is, would Immunify flag which projects are triage versus not, like the badges, or is that something that's more internal?
Yeah, that's something more internal. So we have some projects which are managed and some that are unmanaged. So unmanaged projects are getting the every single submission directly, and they're triaging it themselves. But it's more of an internal thing. I think we may be more open with that in the future with badges. But yeah, it will even if you submit to a project that is unmanaged, if you request mediation, we will still step in. So they're treated essentially the same, just that initial triaging process is different.
Awesome. And then the next question that we have is from Smith3DX, also regarding POC submissions. Can you screen record the POC? Would that be sufficient enough to send in a screen record as part of the POC alongside a written POC?
So for our web and app submissions, we do accept video POCs for certain impacts, but for smart contract vulnerabilities, we are pretty strict with POC, meaning code is sent along with the report. So we like to also say POC, proof of concept, also means proof of code to us because we need to see the code to really verify what's going on.
All right. And then Crypto Pat has another question. Let's say there's a vulnerable contract that is a multi-sig safe, for example, a Gnosis safe. Would this require the signatures of all the owners of the Gnosis safe smart contract?
Um, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by this, but um, if you're so in most bug bounty programs, um, vulnerabilities related to gaining access to privileged accounts are out of scope. So like, if someone were to submit a report that was like, hey, if your private key was leaked, someone can change all these different values. That's usually rejected by a project, obviously. So some cases that there are projects which will reward someone for identifying an account which may have too much privileged control over a contract. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what your question is for the multi-sig safes. But if a multi-sig is the owner of a contract and has access to those privileged functions, it means it's a little safer, since someone would have to steal the private keys or exfiltrate the private keys of every signer up to the threshold that's set.
Awesome. And then another one from Mohammed. So he was asking, do we accept pseudocode if the person is not good at writing Solidity? This is gonna be the last question, and then we'll close it out. Don't I know Alejandro has been taking some time out of his day to help you guys out, and to be with us today. So we'll do the last question, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, so we pretty much only accept runnable code. That's another requirement, is a POC is runnable, because if your like attack contract isn't compiling, that's a pretty big negative on reviewing it, because now we don't know if your screenshot of the output of your POC is actually what happened there. So pseudocode is only only a last resort. If you really if you found like a really critical bug in a project and it's just sitting right out there and anyone could exploit it at any minute, then pseudocode may be acceptable. But at that point, it's kind of up to the project. Having a runnable POC really helps us in convincing a project to get you paid. So yeah.
Awesome. So with that, guys, thank you guys for hopping on. Give a big thanks to Alejandro for coming through and running you through this Uranium Heist POC and answering your questions. It's been an awesome session. Apologies again in the beginning for some of the technical difficulties, but I love the team effort where everybody was pitching in to try and find the solution for us. So thank you guys as usual. It was awesome. It was an awesome session today. Thank you, Alejandro, for coming in, man, and doing this for the group.
Yeah, no problem. It's been great. I'm glad I could teach more people to, make a good POC.
Yeah, and answering these guys' questions. I'm some good questions that have been asking there. And yeah, as usual, thank you guys. We'll see you guys next week. Next week we'll have Beanstalk Protocol on to do a spot the bug challenge for you guys. But yeah, to close this out, thank you, Alejandro. You guys give him a big thank you. He's been awesome to take some time out of his day to answer your questions and kind of run through this for you. And as usual, if you want to see anything specific or have any feedback for some of these hacker hangouts, throw them in the event channel. I'll make note of it. And and then we'll go from there. So thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good rest of your week. And yes, Haru, it was some sort of a sandwich. I'm not going to disclose what sandwich I have, but thank you guys. And we'll see you next week.
See y'all.